as part of the globalist establishment's ongoing push to create a totalitarian, cashless society where every transaction can be tracked and controlled. Indian authorities last week suddenly demonetized the two largest denomination bills in circulation. In Sweden, where government already tracks and monitors almost everything, central bankers are plotting the creation of a digital currency that could be completely controlled, along with those who use it, by authorities. And in Australia, establishment-minded mega banks are plotting with politicians to force everyone into a United Nations-backed cashless society where banks and government have total control over the population. In each case, different excuses have been used. But taken together, it is obvious that something major is going on, worldwide. Liberty and privacy are literally at stake. As this magazine highlighted more than 2 years ago, the global establishment has increasingly been pushing for humanity to submit to what its propagandists touts as a cashless society. Basically, the agenda, pushed by the UN and top globalists, is to have a world in which all payments and transactions are conducted electronically, thereby creating a permanent record for governments to inspect and track at will. Multiple governments and dictatorships from Africa and Asia to Europe and the Americas have been explicitly working toward that goal, and in recent years, even more have joined the effort. Powerful globalist forces and organizations including the UN, Microsoft, the Rockefeller dynasty, the mega banks, central banks, and more are helping, too. However, amid the push, analysts and critics have been pushing back, warning that the implications of such a shift would be nightmarish for people everywhere. From the perspective of globalists, tyrants, central bankers, and mega banks, there are numerous benefits to the anti-cash jihad being waged around the world aside from totally shredding what remains of financial privacy. Among the most important, the ability to force savers to accept negative interest rates. Indeed, as central banking gimmicks to stimulate the central bank-damaged economy continue to fail even with record low interest rates, several fiat currency issuers in Europe have made history by introducing negative rates. Obviously, depositors are unlikely to accept having to pay bankers money to keep their cash in the bank so that monetary authorities and their cronies in commercial banks can further loot the public. But without the existence of cash, people may be left with little choice but to submit to the fleecing. The latest major salvos in the globalist war on cash came fast and furious this month. First, in a controversial address to the nation last week, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced that authorities were removing from circulation the nation's two highest denomination banknotes, the 500 rupee bill, worth about $7.50, and the 1,000 rupee note, worth around $15. The news prompted immediate chaos and extreme hardship, especially devastating for the poor who do not use banks. Under the scheme, justified under the guise of fighting tax evasion and corruption, the notes were immediately demonetized, losing their legal tender status. Officials gave Indians 50 days to hand over all of their 500 and 1,000 rupee bills to a bank or post office, with a government-issued identification card to prove who they are. Top officials even had the nerve to pretend like the assault was for the benefit of everyday citizens. Fake money and terrorism are ruining the nation's fabric, said Indian government leader Modi, claiming that it was very important to keep the news hidden before the official announcement and that all banks would be shut the next day. Honest man cannot buy a house, cannot get proper education due to black money. Cash economy aids black money, corruption and makes life difficult for the poor. Government is imposing a limit on high denomination notes. In the history of nations, such a moment comes when you realize that you must be part of this historical moment. This is one such day. Every common man who is tired of corruption and black money is welcome to contribute to this catharsis. It is very important to cleanse the nation of the corruption. Indian Finance Minister Arun Jaitley was even more open about the agenda, explaining in the media that the government's decision was a major step in moving the country toward a cashless society. The government believes that this decision has been welcomed everywhere. This major step would help India's credibility, he claimed, reassuring citizens that they had nothing to fear and boasting about how money would begin pouring into India's troubled banking system as a result of the decree. It will take India towards a cashless economy. It doesn't merely push the country in that direction, but significantly pushes it. And indeed, that was the point: get more people ensnared into the banking regime and into the formal, government-controlled economy. India has been among the many nations targeted by globalists such as population control fanatic Bill Gates for the war on cash. The extremist Gates Foundation, which helps lead the anti-cash Better Than Cash Alliance, lists India as one of its victims in the war on privacy and liberty. Unsurprisingly, Microsoft is already swooping in to profit off the scheme as a provider of digital payment solutions and other such services being foisted on the public against its will. After praising Modi's decision, the radical billionaire, widely suspected of foisting dangerous vaccines and birth control schemes among Indians, quickly changed his tune, saying he did not have an opinion. Shortly after the announcement plunged the nation into chaos and panic, another announcement was made promising to unveil new bills. But the new high denomination bill is apparently in very short supply, and is basically useless since nobody can make change for it. Next up, multiple news reports suggest Indian authorities are plotting a ban on gold imports. In tandem with the accelerating push for a cashless society, the Indian government has also been collecting biometric data on every citizen as part of a deeply controversial, globalist-backed national ID scheme. Similar plots to capture biometric data and bring everyone into the system are going on around the world. But due to grinding poverty, India and other poor nations appear to be an easy target for globalist schemers seeking to perfect the implementation of their totalitarian agenda. Shortly after the shocking news in India, Swedish authorities, among the global leaders in the war on cash aimed at building a totalitarian, cashless society, announced that they were exploring a plot to create e-cash on the road to phasing out cash completely. Known as the e-krona, the digital cash, unlike regular cash, goes through computer systems, ensuring that Big Brother can monitor all economic transactions. As the New American reported more than 6 years ago, Sweden is being used as a globalist testing ground as the establishment seeks to phase out cash using justifications such as safety and security. Forecasters say the Nordic nation could be the first truly cashless society, possibly getting rid of financial privacy entirely within the next 15 years. Canadian authorities have been working on similar schemes for years, too. In Australia, several major steps have also been taken in recent days on the road toward eliminating financial privacy and freedom under the guise of a cashless society. This week, bailed-out U.S. banking behemoth Citi, a member of the UN-backed anti-cash alliance, announced that it would stop handling cash at its Australian branches. This move to cashless branches reflects Citi's commitment to digital banking, said the bank's chief of retail banking. Swiss banking giant UBS, meanwhile, decided to promote the idea of killing high-denomination banknotes in Australia. The controversial megabank claimed phasing out the notes would help the banking industry, surprise, in addition to helping the government collect more in taxes and wipe out the black market. Critics, though, are crying foul. The government, media, banks, and even academia have formed a single, unified chorus to push this idea out to consumers that cashless is good for everyone, explained liberty-minded international businessman and SovereignMan.com founder Simon Black, adding that the trend was occurring around the world. It would indeed be good for the banks, Black explained, noting that bank deposits and thus, bank profits, would increase. Governments would also benefit by virtue of their regulatory control over banks, which would now have all savings. This means that your politicians would have more control over your savings and fewer obstacles to impose capital controls or engage in civil asset forfeiture, he added. Everyone benefits from a cashless society, except for you, continued Black. For individuals, cash still has plenty of important advantages. Cash is one of the few remaining options for financial privacy that doesn't create a permanent record of every purchase or transaction you make. It's also an easy way to reduce your exposure to risks in the broader financial system. Think about it, the banking system is full of institutions that never miss an opportunity to demonstrate they cannot be trusted with our money. So, while untrustworthy banks and governments would indeed benefit from the scheming, everyday people would suffer in more than a few ways. Also scrutinizing the establishment's justifications used to push the cashless society agenda were the market-oriented analysts at the Daily Bell. We are told these are disparate and individual decisions of various entities and nation-states. But they are nothing of the sort. Once again, surreptitiously, the banking elites that want to run the world are surely organizing a pan-global stratagem to advance their control. They explained in a recent piece analyzing the latest developments. If everyone's cash is controlled, further technocratic globalization of society on a worldwide scale becomes increasingly feasible. The Daily Bell analysts noted as well that the war on cash would help the establishment impose negative interest rates and further consolidate control over humanity. The ongoing implementation of a global cash ban has taken on increased urgency because of growing negative interest rates worldwide, they wrote, noting that people did not want to pay banks to hold their cash and so, banning it would be a solution, and that the sociopathic endeavor appears to be aiming to wipe out gold, too. As the attacks on wealth increase, any monetary element not immediately available digitally will come under scrutiny and eventually be targeted with demands for confiscation. Conclusion: these emergent attacks certainly illustrate a growing elite desperation to take control, worldwide, sooner rather than later. Of course, advocates of abolishing cash have tried to portray the agenda as a natural and organic phenomenon driven largely on its own, a sort of evolution in human society, perhaps. In a July 2, 2014, propaganda feature by CNN, the increasingly discredited news outfit even included a graphic purporting to show the evolution of a cashless society, highlighting how far along each country is on the road to abolishing cash entirely. Apparently the United States was then at a tipping point while Canada, Belgium, France, Sweden, and others were almost cashless. Other countries were either at the inception or transitioning. In reality, though, despite the talking points of the establishment's propaganda organs, the trends are hardly taking place on their own. Big business cronies and particularly the too big to jail bailed out mega banks have played a major role. Governments, meanwhile, are largely driving the plot with taxpayer funding. Controversial and deep-pocketed mega foundations are helping to bankroll it all and build some semblance of public support. In September of 2012, for example, the Ford Foundation, which funds everything from pro-abortion reproductive justice to sustainable development totalitarianism, unveiled what it called its Better Than Cash Alliance. On its website, the Ford Foundation described its scheme thus: the Better Than Cash Alliance partners with governments, the development community and the private sector to empower people by shifting from cash to electronic payments. Among the organizations involved in the radical partnership are the CIA-linked Ford Foundation, the American taxpayer-funded U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, bailed-out megabank Citi, credit card giant Visa, and more. The United Nations is also at the heart of the plot, with the UN Capital Development Fund serving as the alliance's secretariat. Other UN outfits involved in the scheme include the World Food Programme and the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP. Several governments and official agencies are listed on the alliance's website, too, including authorities in Malawi, Colombia, Kenya, Afghanistan, Peru, and the Philippines. Some nominally private aid agencies are also involved. In short, The same globalist banking government establishment that has been looting and oppressing humanity for generations is preparing to take its totalitarian scheming to the next level, making the looting and control grid practically inescapable. The arguments purportedly justifying the cashless society agenda were undoubtedly well tested by focus groups and public relations agencies before being unveiled. But as the establishment's propaganda organs become increasingly discredited, so do their talking points to justify tyranny. Americans and people around the world should not only reject the dangerous cashless society scheme, but should demand a return to a sound and honest monetary system not based on conjuring debt-based fiat